I'm Alicia.
And I'm Maddie.
And welcome to the Fangirl Diaries, a podcast where we talk about our obsessions,
Reminisce about our teen icons,
and explore the books, movies, and shows that made us the incredibly nerdy 30-somethings that we now are.
Morning, Alicia.
Hello. This is a coffee
doing?
break episode.
Yeah, we're taking our lunch break and having a bit of a chat.
Yeah, lunch break, coffee break. I mean, I've still got my coffee from this morning, but you're right. Technically, it's a lunch break chat.
It's going to be good. And we're in the mood, I think, to talk a little bit about villains.
Oh, we're going to have such a heated chat. We're going to talk about baddies, villains, because they crop up so often in all of the pieces of art and all the pieces of storytelling that we focus our various episodes on. And sometimes we just don't have the time to discuss them separately.
Yeah, and we can compare and contrast the different types of villains, the ones that are kind of got similar themes to each other. We're going to bring together lots and lots of our favourite obsessions in this coffee break episode.
And we have to use this episode to acknowledge that we both love and hate villains. And we're going to have to split those into separate categories because some of our obsessions have centered on the villains of a piece. And they need to be treated separately from those who our hatred has been directed at.
Yeah, maybe we should start then with probably like the least interesting type of villain, which is like the huge kind of world-ending big villain that doesn't have a personality necessarily, but is just this like representation of evil. And that's not to say that they are bad villains, because someone like Sauron fits into this category of being this kind of like otherworldly, huge villain that we can say is like the root of all evil. But they're not going to be those kinds of villains that like we obsess over and that we're super into the psychology of. So I think maybe like Sauron fits into that. Voldemort fits into that a little bit. The Emperor in Star Wars. Often these big series where you need like the one biggest, hugest villain at the end. They're probably the least interesting as characters, and so we won't spend loads of time on them, but we'll start there maybe.
They're necessary, though, because you use the phrase world ending, that when we have a really high concept fantasy series or anything like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, we need a Voldemort, a Sauron, an army of the dead, because the overall threat has to be that the very existence and fabric of that world has to genuinely be vulnerable to somebody or thing that is more powerful than it. And that is normally the kind of background threat going on through a very, very long-standing book saga. But are they interesting? Hell no.
No, they're not the ones we want to talk about today.
No, they're not. Like, you never think, oh, good, the giant eye of Sauron's been given some screen time. Hurrah. It's a little bit different when we get into characters like Voldemort or the Emperor in Star Wars, who are in physical form for at least some of the series, are given dialogue, are given characterization. But still, they get trumped, I feel, by some of the micro villains within those various sagas that we're more interested in.
Yeah, so that's a key point. Often within these big worlds, you have that huge endgame villain, but then you have more interesting minier villains along the way who often have more personality, and either you love to hate them or you actually kind of love them a little bit, because they're much more interesting. So who do you want to start with in that kind of category?
Okay, so in fact, all of those franchises that we just mentioned have these. I think one of the great examples, and we didn't have time to pay her the right amount of homage, is Professor Umbridge in Harry Potter.
Ooh, yes.
In the Order of the Phoenix, book 5 of Harry Potter, because the threat from Voldemort is very much real throughout the books. And what I think is so clever about Professor Umbridge is that she isn't even a micro-villain in the sense that but she doesn't belong to Voldemort's cause even. So
No.
she's different from when we move on to talking about Darth Vader as a villain and as a servant of the Emperor. Umbridge brings an evil to Harry Potter that isn't even part of the same squad as Voldemort.
Yeah. Yeah, she's like a different threat that comes from a different angle. And that's actually quite similar to some of those other villains that we really hate in Game of Thrones. In our last couple of episodes, we've talked about both Joffrey and Ramsay. Neither of them are like servants of the undead army. They are a completely different threat. But they keep the storyline going by having those subplots of threat and tension and conflict that keep you going until you're waiting for the end guy.
Books that have that device are so clever because it adds to the frustration for a reader where you think, don't distract me with this. I need to get back to the boss villain and don't distract my characters with this. Like
Yes.
if Jon Snow has to waste time fighting Ramsay, he's not conserving energy to fight the Night King. Like, could we just all get on side, please?
Umbridge was exactly the same. The amount of like energy and emotion that Harry had to put into like dealing with Umbridge and like all the punishments that he like she gave him, and yeah, it took up so much of his like brain space that we weren't able to just focus on Voldemort. And she was actively antagonistic to the fight against Voldemort, which was also interesting.
I want to make a case for if this was an awards category, that Professor Umbridge is the perfect villain. To me, she is unbeatable. First, because of her use as that kind of device to tantalizingly distract us from Voldemort, and it's so painful. But she's also utilized like that sort of nightmarish component where in a dream, you understand the truth, or you know you need to get to the magical tunnel. But somebody in the dream isn't listening to you. Somebody isn't taking you seriously. Somebody is holding you back. And in The Order of the Phoenix, Umbridge is the mouthpiece of the Ministry of Magic, who at this point in the saga have decided to ignore the fact, and indeed to deny the fact, that Voldemort has returned, and to try and squash that truth as it comes in forms of dialogue from Harry and his friends. So she's also the perfect embodiment of like a state that has started to commit to fake news and that is shutting down truth. She and the Ministry of Magic in that book of Harry Potter take the wizarding world into a post-truth world. And it's so relevant.
It's true. It's true.
It's so relevant. But she also gets points for top villain by being so perfectly fully realized as a character. Like everything about her physicality. She has that little sound that she makes. She has those pink accessories. She has photos and pictures of cats. She has doilies. And she's a brilliant villain because she is given power in the framework that matters the most to children, which is that she's put in a position of authority at school.
Yeah, yeah.
She's given some school-based power.
For sure. And I think the other kind of parallel within this category of these kind of villains that we truly hate, that are, you know, are characters along the way, when we're talking about Ramsay and Joffrey, they are in a way similar in that they feel like real people and real characters from the real world. They don't feel otherworldly. Like Umbridge feels like you could imagine that head teacher. You could imagine that political kind of manipulation going on. And Joffrey and Ramsay are kind of similar in a way, in that they are representative of the cruelty of humanity. Like they are real in that we know there are people that revel in pain and cruelty, and those people exist, whereas like the Night King doesn't exist. And so that's why Joffrey and Ramsay were such hateful villains is because they feel like true representations of the worst of humanity, which is another kind of a kind of another side to the Umbridge type villain, I guess.
Yeah. Umbridge is also the embodiment of something that children find so difficult, which is she's a liar. And she's so brilliantly written because, of course, she uses that word in her own messed up punishment framework. She has Harry carve into his hand, I must not tell lies, when Umbridge herself is the proponent of this false narrative that Voldemort is not back. She is a liar. Children hate liars. And when we've got a book where we, the reader, are in a kind of omniscient position, we understand that Voldemort is back. We understand that Harry is telling the truth. We feel so aggrieved about Umbridge because we know she's lying. It's so powerful. It's so hateful. I
Yeah.
hate Umbridge.
Okay, all right. So we've talked about some villains that we really hate, those ones that just like get under your skin and that you just can't stand, but that's what makes them so good. What about villains that we like kind of like not like the ones that we find hot, which we'll definitely get onto, but just villains that are just really, really enjoyable.
Yeah. Oh my God, there's so many of them. I feel like this is a kind of framework that's been really mastered by Disney,
Mm-hmm.
and that so many of the villains we like outside of Disney film cartoons have followed the same sort of formula. And
Yeah.
to name a few, these are people like Hades. These are people like lions like Scar. Oh my gosh, speaking of lions, Maddie, do you remember the King John who sucks his thumb in Robin Hood?
Yes,
And
I do.
and Hiss the snake. That's so good.
Yeah.
Some of these Disney villains, who are, of course, as everything else is, perfected in the kind of high Disney run of films in the 90s. Um, they sometimes have the best scenes, the best one-liners. They have this like hilarious kind of sort of campness to them. Like they're often a little bit. Hades is so vain. He's interested in his hair. He's got these wonderful character traits that make him more interesting to watch than the protagonist Hercules. I'm sorry, but it's true.
For sure. And even the phrase you used of Disney villains has become like it's a phrase used in and of itself. Like you find those kinds of characters in all sorts of media. And you're right, it's been copied from Disney. This kind of villain that is you can kind of see often you can like see their point of view in a kind of funny way. Ursula is another one that's
Yes.
really great. And uh, yeah, as you say, they are often camp, which is it makes them fun and entertaining, and it works for kids. And so you do get kind of similar ideas outside of Disney, but they definitely are like, yeah, originated in the Disney world. Which is your favorite of those Disney villains, do you reckon?
I feel like it really is a very difficult race between Hades and Scar.
You're
Um,
right.
but
But that's because Hercules is our secret favorite.
I
We
know
love Hercules.
everyone else who loves Hercules, please listen to our full episode on that. But you can sometimes tell that the creators behind these films have a real love for their villains. Like if you look at something like Aladdin, the styling that is given to Jafar, like apart from Princess Jasmine's iconic powder blue two-piece, the person who is wearing the best outfit in Aladdin is Jafar. It just
Yeah.
is Jafar. He has the
And
best
mate,
accessories.
you think about it like I imagine that the people animating the movies just loved and enjoyed drawing those and creating those characters much more than like the heroes. Like it's so much more fun to come up with something a bit extravagant and a bit wild. And it's the same as like, when we do plays in theatre and stuff, like playing the villain is way more fun than just playing the straight like hero main character. So yeah, that's why these characters can be much more entertaining.
Well, they also are if they're given a shred of humanity or a shred of motivation that we can
Mhm.
empathize with. So Hades fundamentally feels like he's been done wrong by Zeus.
Yeah.
He's on a vengeance trip. So is Scar, who feels he's been cut out of the line of succession. They've sort of got reasons, but while they shouldn't be acting on those instincts, you can sort of understand a little bit why they're doing what they're doing. Um, Whereas I think the less interesting Disney villains to watch are the ones that aren't given any element of humanity. Like, for example, I have forgotten his name. That's a point even on itself. I can't remember the name of the leader of the Huns in Mulan,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
but he is just
Uh,
an out and out villain, and he is not interesting. He's not
yes,
interesting.
we never learn anything about him
No,
in Mulan.
but he's genuinely scary. Like, Maddie, let me ask you this. Who is actually a scary Disney villain to you? Like, who is not one that we think is on
Ooh.
the enjoyable list? Who is actually threatening?
I used to find Maleficent pretty scary, although she probably falls. She is camp and extravagant and has personality as well. But maybe it was just the age at which I watched like Sleeping Beauty. It was just like, yeah, pretty scary.
Maleficent is really frightening. She is definitely one of the frightening villains. But even in the run of high 90s Disney, I've got to say that Frollo is a really difficult watch.
Oh
Um,
yeah, good
he's
one.
he's frightening. He's really frightening, and he undertakes some acts of extreme violence against the vulnerable in that film. That is a really
Mm,
really hard watch. Um, he's a frightening Disney villain, actually. Frollo, I find him a really really difficult watch. He's genuinely terrifying.
yeah.
Whereas in our quite fun list has got to be people like Governor Ratcliffe.
Yes.
Pontus, he's just like set up his little suite on the boat with his like pug, and the villains that are the
Jafar is great as well. Jafar in
Jafar is
Aladdin.
amazing. He has
Yeah,
Iago. The good
yeah,
villains have the good sidekicks. Like Hades has Pain and Panic.
yeah.
Yeah, Jafar has Iago. Governor Ratcliffe has that dog and his little dog's body. You know, that little guy who runs around doing all his bidding all the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, the good villains have the good sidekicks and the good accessories. So yeah, there's definitely a list there.
All right, one more category that kind of follows on from this is what I'm like dubbing like adventure style villains. And the first one that came to mind is sort of a Disney villain, which is Captain Barbossa. And it's like these big, like kind of epic romp type movies that always have like an adventure style villain. So yeah, definitely Captain Barbossa. I think possibly a lot of like Bond villains fall into this category where they're not quite as fun and camp as a true Disney villain, but they're close to that. Um, and they kind of are halfway between a Disney villain and like the big bad end villain. But they like Indiana Jones baddies, those kinds of guys where they maybe have like a big team of like, in Indiana Jones, it's always like against the Nazis or the Russians or whoever. They got this big like pack of pretty useless like soldiers that the hero has to like kind of fight against I think that's another kind of side of villainy. And I think Barbossa is my favorite of those kinds of villains.
I think in our podcast episode about Pirates of the Caribbean, which, if I'm not wrong, was our first ever podcast episode of this whole series, we referred to Barbossa as a Disney villain, and then
Mm,
had to address the fact that, of course, he is a Disney villain because it's a Disney
yeah, it's
franchise.
literally a Disney villain. Yeah,
But it's just that it's live action, so we sometimes separate the two.
yeah,
But you're so right to group him with Bond villains and with the Disney villains that we enjoy so much, because these are the sort of roles that actors want. Like if Jeffrey Rush was accurately described what was in store for him to play in terms of playing Captain Barbossa, like I'm not surprised he said yes to that role. Or it's often like as much of a privilege to be cast as a Bond villain as it is to be cast as Bond. You
yeah,
can see why people like Javier Bardem said yes.
yeah.
Um, you want to spend time in. I love the bits of James Bond where Bond is briefly, he's only ever briefly captured, and spends time in the villain's lair. Their lairs are often great. It's sometimes the best bit of the film.
Yeah.
They've always got the best lines, again, some nifty accessories like Bond himself.
Something recognizable often, right? Like they've got an item of clothing or an object or something about their physical appearance that makes them instantly recognizable. That's something that makes a really great villain.
Yeah, like Barbossa's got that ridiculously oversized hat.
Yeah.
The fact that he's very like faithful to. So yeah, they're in a category of themselves. The adventure or kind of spy villain for sure.
You know what else kind of falls in this arena, which we don't often talk about, comic books or comic book adaptations, because in general that's just not one of our big obsessions. But I would say Batman villains falls into this category with like the Joker and the Penguin and whatever. And I mean, if we're talking about great villain performances of all time, Heath Ledger as the Joker is like one of the greatest villains in a movie ever. Just unbelievable.
I'm so glad you brought him up. Because he wasn't in our pre-notes, and I don't believe we forgot him.
I know.
You're so right. One of the top villain performances of all time.
We should do an episode on The Dark Knight.
Absolutely. I feel like that was so central to our kind of teenage years, that film coming out.
Yeah.
And then particularly its release at a time when I believe it was the year when Heath Ledger sadly passed away. I mean, didn't he receive the Oscar posthumously for that?
Yeah. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that year being that particularly tragic year, where it was like Heath Ledger's moment of glory. And of course, at the same time, the year of his death. But he is a really useful segue into perhaps our completely shameless category. Because, Maddie, correct me if I'm speaking on your behalf, but I find certainly Heath Ledger as the Joker frighteningly attractive.
Yes, he is exceptionally attractive. And like at the time, I definitely was completely obsessed with that performance in both this is an incredible acting performance, but also his mannerisms and his way of commanding a room and his like power in that movie was just incredibly attractive in a very dangerous and disturbing way.
I know this is one of those things where it's like, what does this say about you and I? But I remember us having a real little obsession with Heath Ledger as the Joker, and I think that was because we were both familiar with Heath Ledger anyway, and it was so clever of him to take on that role because he had spent so long being a bit of a teenage heartthrob. Like he will never be overtaken for his performance in 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah.
One of the great teen roles of all time. By the way, another coffee break episode we should do is about the great teen movies and the great teen heartthrobs. We've got
of the noughties, basically. Our era.
of the late 90s, early noughties, for sure.
Yeah.
But there were parts of that film where you as a viewer could see the beauty of Heath Ledger through the makeup. And that was sort of unignorable. But you're right, it was his command, it was his presence. There's something a little bit not even a little bit, there's something maniacal about him that somehow you can't help but watch. He has a magnetism that is just so compelling. I almost forget that Christian Bale's in that movie. I just don't care. I just want to watch Heath Ledger.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're moving then swiftly into our villains that we think are hot category, which is not small.
No, side note is a long list. Why do you think this list is long, Maddie? Is it just the case? Like, why?
It's not just villains, right? These characters are designed, most of them, maybe not the Joker, but most of these villains are designed in this way, right? They are often like the misunderstood, troubled, dark, kind of mysterious guys. And often they start as villains. And actually, by the end, you learn a lot about them. They're not really that bad underneath. You feel sorry for them. It's such a cliche, but like it really works. And so it's not like it's our fault. These people have been designed to attract women of a certain nature, of which we both are.
These men are like Venus flytraps for people that have your and my psychology
Yeah.
and your and my proclivities when it comes to the sort of fictitious men that we enjoy. Um, to the extent now where I feel like I can see when one's coming and I just walk blindly into that trap. Like
Yeah.
we talked about on our episode where we discussed A Court of Thorns and Roses. And you are asked to spend 80% at least of that book understanding that Tamlin is the hero. Tamlin is the man that Feyre is supposed to be in love with, and therefore that the reader is supposed to be in love with. But somewhere early on, this villainous, dark haired, purple eyed man appears, who's described as wearing sort of midnight black velvet. And he's gone around doing like some casual beheading. He's obviously a baddie at this point. But the minute he's introduced, I'm like, oh, well, it's that guy. It's obviously that guy.
It's obviously that guy the whole time.
Obviously that guy.
The quintessential one of these that you put on the list is the top one is Damien Salvatore in The Vampire Diaries.
God.
I
love him.
The ultimate. Like, they designed it that way, right? It's not our fault. Like, he is just meant to be. He's so much more interesting than Stefan. He's got more character. He's got more backstory. He has more chemistry with the main lead woman. Like, what else are we supposed to think? It's not our fault.
I can't wait for us to do what I'm sure is going to have to be a 2-part at least episode on The Vampire Diaries.
Oh my God. I've not rewatched it in so long, but yeah.
The Vampire Diaries is the kind of thing, and like I'm not afraid to admit this, right? This podcast called The Fangirl Diaries, that I often feel I just don't have the time to sit down and do a full rewatch of. But that I will watch YouTube compilations of like, I'm that person that watches like the top 10 Delena moments. And I hate myself. I hate myself for that. But I'm like, do you know what? I just want to see that conversation that they have in whatever it is, season 5, about their relationship. I want to watch it. I want to see it. I want to see the multiple sequence. I want to see the kiss montage with Florence and the Machine in the background. I want it. I know it. I have watched it on repeat.
I know. He even like the way that he enters when he first arrives, he's like in the fog and he's like mysteriously appears out of nowhere, and you're just like, this is the guy. Like, why are we caring about the other guy? What's the point?
It was exactly that same thing. It was that we were asked to, as a viewer, buy into kind of Team Stefan for, it was at least a good 2 seasons of him.
Yeah.
But they also introduced Damon right away, who was the villain, who was the antagonist for at least the first season. And I thought, yeah, but we're just biding our time, aren't we? I mean, come on. Like, how long is it until...
And it does. And yeah, they get together and you see all his like nice side of his character and blah blah blah. And I don't know, it was kind of inevitable. While we're on vampires though, and I know that this isn't one that you watched loads, but we have mentioned before on the pod, which is True Blood. And True Blood really tries really hard at the beginning to persuade you that the main evil vampire guy is going to be the guy. So they have this guy, Bill Compton. He comes in, you would think he was the guy that we're talking about. He's a vampire. He's dark and handsome, and he's like evil, and he's like, he has to drink blood, and like he is all of those things. He's not a good guy, but he's immediately put together with the main girl as like her love interest straight away. And so you would think that would be, well, okay, we got the guy right away. We got the cool dark guy. But no, later we get an even more evil vampire come along who's called Eric, played by Alexander Skarsgård, who is, a beautiful, beautiful man. And the even more evil vampire becomes the guy we're talking about, even in a show where they tried to start off with the evil vampire as the guy. It didn't work.
I need to go back and give True Blood my true attention, because you really had some staying power with that, but I was so not engaged with the character of Bill, and I couldn't see a version of Damon immediately in the wings that I just wasn't bought in. I couldn't buy into the show. And it was the lack of, I thought, a really compelling like enemies to lovers arc. And we have to say that's why you need an enemy. If we don't have an enemy, we don't have enemies to lovers, which is what,
Yes, yeah.
that's what Rhysand and Feyre are. That's why I prefer watching Spike and Buffy than Angel and Buffy.
Yeah, it's what the Phantom is. It's all of
It's what
these.
Phantom is in Phantom of the Opera. I need a bad guy to get with my leading lady. That is the formula that I will buy a book for, me and half the population. It's why we want to see, it's why we know from page one that Xaden Riorson is not a bad guy. He's not.
He's not. It's true.
It's not. It's like, oh, Violet approaches the parapet, and I'm like going through my pages, like I'm just waiting for the next page to say, and then this 6'6" dark-haired man with two swords strapped across his back snarled at her. And I'm like, that's our guy. That's our guy.
They always have to have redemption arcs because they often do, but I'm not sure they always have to fall into this category.
Do they always have a redemption arc? Like, as in, do we find any villains hot who are just out and out villains? I guess the Joker.
Yeah, the Joker was the one, but I think he's probably only slightly on the edge of this character category. I think most of these are ones where they appear to be the villain, but we learn their true feelings and why they are the way they are, and they have some redeeming qualities underneath. I mean, the Phantom's an interesting one because although we do learn about why he has become the way he is, and we can sympathize with him feeling like lonely and this poor, like rejected monster guy, he doesn't really redeem himself other than just like letting them go at the end. He's not actually fully redeemed. He's still a bad guy. He's still, I don't know. Whereas someone like Spike, we do see become a better vampire, a better person.
Oh, the Spike redemption arc is one of the most fully fledged, although I mean, again, we talked about at length, also one of the most flawed redemption arcs because they had that arc going perfect. They had that arc working so well.
And they ruined it.
And they ruined it. Spike was integrated into the Scoobies. He was in love with Buffy. He was being self-sacrificing for Buffy. He was fully on side. And then we get seeing red. And I'm like, why has this happened? Why has this happened? So he has to have like a redemption arc B where he goes and gets a soul. We have to reintegrate him. And I just think, why did you do this? Why?
Yeah, we didn't need that. Yeah, he could have been fine all along. And I think this is why probably there are some people in fandoms online who really don't like the kind of enemies to lovers or just are not into the bad guy being the love interest, because you do have to put aside a lot of terrible things that those people have done. And that's kind of part of the fun. You could do that in fiction. It's okay to be like, yeah, this guy like killed 100 people like 200 years ago, and now we forgive him. Like, it's okay, which you can't do in real life. But fiction is fiction, and it's not real life, so it's okay to like explore your fantasies in this way.
I think that's right. And I'm just horrified by the number of examples that keep coming to mind where we just repeatedly have been obsessed with who's somebody who seems to be villainous, at least in season one or book one or the first half of a particular saga. Like mine and your only interests in Gossip Girl lay with Chuck Bass.
Yeah, yeah.
They lay with Chuck Bass.
Yeah, more like real villains, real life villains in shows. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. We always liked the person who was sort of hateful at first, but then gets to go on this redemption arc. But having said that, in terms of pieces of literature or films that we have enjoyed that are absent of a villain, you raised this point when we talked about The Summer I Turned Pretty. And there can be a very effective love triangle series. The Notebook is another good example where all the potential contenders for our heroine's affection are good guys. There's no villain.
Sure, for sure. And the tension then in those stories comes from circumstance and like the fact that not everyone can get what they want and not everyone can end up happy. That's kind of the villain, right? It's like a more realistic scenario where it's not the people who are villainous, it's the situation that is bad.
Mm. Or if looked at with another lens, where problematically the heroine herself is the villain. That's even a phrase
Mm.
that The Summer I Turned Pretty has Belly use in that kind of finale episode. She says, "No, I was the villain."
Yeah.
Um, or we have thought about, you know, in the Notebook, there's an element to which, at least one of those guys' lives were going to be ruined by
Mm.
the decision being made between them. That Ali has to wreck one of their lives. Ugh, it's just in many ways you can't help but think, oh, Ali, you're a villain. These are two perfectly nice gentlemen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of also made me realize how many of the villains we talked about are men.
Oh my
We
God,
haven't
it's
really,
embarrassing, isn't it?
we did cover Umbridge right at the beginning, and we
She's my top
mentioned,
villain.
yeah, true, and we mentioned Maleficent and Ursula, but we do tend to see most villains being men. I was trying to think of some other good female villains, and there's uh I recently watched, I don't know if you've seen them. I recently watched the Paddington movies. And like in the first one, Nicole Kidman is like this amazing, amazing villain who's like sole, it's kind of a bit 101 Dalmatians. Her sole like purpose in life is to like go around like stuffing animals, like killing animals and like stuffing them to put in a museum. And she's just like brilliant. But also
I've got some female villains for
she
you.
she really reminded me of Northern Lights, of Mrs. Coulter in Northern Lights is an excellent, excellent female villain because I guess the difference with female villains is you often are playing on the femininity of the character to create something villainous. And she does that. She's like a protector, but underneath is treacherous and evil. And yeah, she's a great villain.
There are so many good female villains. The ultimate best villain in all of Buffy is Glory,
Mm.
um, who, again, we've talked about at length, but that's one of the best performances in the whole Buffy saga. Some of the best writing is given to Glory. The best outfits are given to Glory. She is magnetic on screen to a point where she sometimes trumps Sarah Michelle Gellar. I'm just watching Glory.
That's
Um,
true.
and within the same franchise, if we're thinking about not enemies to lovers, but enemies to friends, I offer Faith to the jury.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
one of the best redemption arcs, one of the best characters, starts out as a friend of Buffy's, becomes a nemesis of Buffy's, becomes a micro villain, and then in the end is one of the most beloved characters. And again, an iconic performance from Eliza Dushku. So Faith has to be on that list, 100%. And let's not forget the amazing Meryl Streep performance in The Devil Wears Prada. Surely Miranda Priestley is one of the top villains of all time. Surely.
Yeah. What a good nomination. All right.
Oh,
Were there any other categories that we haven't covered, or is that kind of we should maybe ask the audience to send us some of their suggestions of their favorite villains. Send us on Instagram like your favorite villains, and we'll put up some little Instagram stories, like a little series.
I'm just so sure that we've missed loads and that when we go through them, that's it. Like out of the back of The Devil Wears Prada, sort of what's now going to be a franchise, I am so sat for the next one. I want to see it. Like, yes, Anne Hathaway is pretty good in that movie. But the people that are memorable, or I feel like the person that was made a star from that was Emily Blunt, and she's playing a more villainous
Mhm.
character.
Yeah.
But triumphing over them all is Meryl Streep as Miranda Priestley. So yeah,
Nice.
any more suggestions in that category, please send them in to us.
Nice. All right. Well, it's been a good, great lunch break, Alicia. I've enjoyed talking about villains, and I'm sure whatever our next episode is going to be, we'll have some great villains to talk about.
especially if we do the Vampire Diaries. We're going to need to sit down, go through a full rewatch. Somebody like Damon deserves our time and patience for sure. But yes, until next time, that was Villains.
You've been listening to the Fangirl Diaries. Follow us on Instagram at Fangirl Diaries Pod.
And do share us with any of your friends that you think might enjoy the podcast, and rate or review us on Spotify or Apple Music.